Hello everyone, my name is Gauri Chauhan and I'm a student from JSID Institute of Design, and today I'm here with a very special guest, someone with over 40 years of experience in design consultancy and academic leadership, Jatin Bhatt. So, hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, so to begin with, can you share your journey from being an NID graduate in Prof design to being an independent design academic and practitioner?
Yeah, sure. It's a long journey. So it goes back to 1971 when I joined NID.
Oh.
And graduated in 1977. Mm-hmm. This used to be 5.5 years program. At that time, it was equivalent to masters. And when I graduated, at that time the design scene wasn't what it is today. Design wasn't understood. People had no idea what design was all about. And one of the challenges that we had, all of us who graduated in those times, was to really tell people what design can do. I was in a way fortunate that I started to work with a company in Bombay called Hawkins Pressure Cookers and Appliances. And they, in those times, were rather forward-looking, and they believed in design. So I had a good initiation into designing products with Hawkins. So that was the beginning. Subsequently, I joined some of my friends who had set up a consultancy in Pune, and that was 1980. And that was the time where I think I and my friends who were part of this company did some of the most phenomenal work and also tried to get across the value of design to some of the very, very significant corporate clients. Anyway, Pune also was, even at that time, very forward-looking and also open about experimenting with new inputs, new expertise. And it did manage to work with some of the top companies in those times. So it was to start with Thermex, which makes huge boilers and other related energy products, which are actually not products, really, they are installations. So the size is massive. We also work with kinetic engineering, where the first two-wheeler was indigenously designed in India. Mm-hmm. And that is where we had an opportunity to experiment a lot with materials, with technologies, and introducing really path-breaking shift in the kind of materials which used to be applied to automobiles in those times. So we were able to successfully shift from metal to plastics. Common perception at that time was that plastics break. And this was not limited to average person. Also somehow engineers also had a very poor opinion of plastic. One reason was that there was very little data which is available in terms of how to evaluate materials and their properties, which is technical data. Something that we very, very rigorously followed. We always were in touch with some of the top companies which were in material production. We always reached out to them in terms of collecting catalogs. Remember, there was no Gmail, no internet, so it was snail mail in those times. So when we asked for something, and what we would get would take at least about 1.5 to 2 months to get the information. And that was our weapon. Information, data was something that we figured we needed in order to really argue our case. And that's where not only with Kinetic, which actually was an amazingly open client, they just gave us an engine and say, okay, do the rest of the stuff yourself. So it was quite satisfying, gratifying, and path-breaking in the sense of developing an automobile product, a two-wheeler, from scratch. Almost took, I think, about 2 years or 2.5 years from the initial concept to final launch of the product, and they were involved right through the journey. Similarly, with Kirloskar oil engines, again, same problem. How do we replace a lot of these metal parts to plastics, which we believed, backed by data, that they last longer. They are more suitable for the kind of applications that the diesel engine is meant for. So that was an interesting kind of a journey.
Okay, so you are an entrepreneur as well, and over the years, what changes have you observed in the field of product design, especially in this digital age?
Okay, in fact, that's an interesting question. One is I like to go back to what we are doing in Pune. We talk a lot about experience design, right? That's the buzzword in design today. We also talk about digital design. That's another dimension that we talk about in design. Let me tell you that one of the first experience design projects was sold to Thermex when we had to take their huge, plans of boilers, etc., to their international exhibitions, and they were not able to take such a huge plant. And that's why we suggested we'll work out and develop working models where customers can interact with these models and understand the USP of each and every component, each and every function, how it is distinct and different, and of course, most efficient vis-a-vis any other competitor. So that is what we are able to do in those times. So that is our first experience with an experiment with what we call experience design.
True.
One thing which has changed is that design started with analog, it's physical. There was very little of what one would call the digital space. One of the first, examples of digital were these simple watches, which moved from analog to digital. One could actually have numbers, Casios, and all that. And that is where I think people started to have the first sense of what is called digital. But that is not what we mean today by digital. So that was the beginning. I think I must say that animation industry has been there in India for quite a while, and thanks to NID, that it was something which contributed a lot in today's time to what we call digital space. So if you look at game design, which is one of the developments and growing very, very fast in India, and I think the reason why it has succeeded and why it's sustaining itself is that animation as a foundation was built up through many excellent graduates from NID and now, of course, many other institutions. So you have to understand that there is a connection between animation, film, and digital in game design. Apart from that, there are two differentiations that I would make. One is digital products, another is digital in products. So you have lots and lots of digitals in products. So today, any kind of an interface that you are looking at, whether it is white goods, whether it is appliances, they have moved from physical, from knobs and switches to all digital control. So that is one shift which has taken place. That is where the digital has found a space in physical. And that is also true with some of the areas that not many people talk about, whether it is machine tools, machinery, mechanics, big automated plants. They used to be mechanical at one time. The controls were different. Today, all these are programmed. They actually have interface which is purely controlled by the digital and reduces error to a great degree. It is more predictable. It can be more focused in terms of the kind of specifications of outcome that you want to achieve. And that's where I think digital has come into products. Digital products are different. Digital products are, to start with, a mobile phone. Anything which is a screen, technically, to me, is a digital product. Any major interface which has a screen. So starting with mobile phones, which have led to what we call the UI and the UX, the whole aspect of app development. So that is one huge space. Then, of course, websites, social media, these are all digital products. And I think one of the most significant developments which I see now is that experience is taking the foreground. That's becoming more and more important. And many of these technologies which are developing, whether they are virtual reality, augmented reality, as we move along, they are finding more and more space in terms of determining the kind of emotive experience that you can engage the customers with. So that's another dimension which I would call is also part of digital products.
Okay, can we talk a little about your connections with gaming background?
Okay, sure. So I got involved with toy industry many years ago, and that was part of my work at NIPT Delhi. I was actually the departmental chair. I was the founding chair at National Institute of Fashion Technology Delhi, and I was heading the accessory design department there.
Okay.
And I was very keen that over a period of time, we covered large gamut of products under accessories and lifestyle. And as I was working along, I realized that children's products, toys and games are getting to be integral to lifestyle. The whole concept of what toys were about 50 years ago and what they are now has transformed completely. In a sector which is growing at amazing kind of a scale. And this was way back in 99 where I thought that we should actually start a specialization in toys and children's products. And that's where my connection started. I along with my colleagues, we worked very closely with the Indian Toy Association, that is Toy Association of India, that actually constitutes all the toy manufacturers and traders in India. And it's quite a large, but of course, small scale or micro scale industry, predominantly based in Delhi. Delhi, in fact, caters to almost about 70% of the toy market in India. And we thought maybe that's where we need to begin. And can we change the way toys are designed, visualized, made, and more importantly, the quality aspect of it, not only in terms of how it's manufactured, that is important, but how it actually gives a value to the customer, and predominantly the children, whether they are educational toys or whether they are toys for entertainment, they need to actually give something of value. And that is where we realized that China, in few years, overtook India and was doing some amazing work in toys. So we said, why not India? And that's where the whole project, which was funded by UNIDO, started, and we were able to set up what is called Toy Design Center in Delhi. It lasted for about 1.5 years, and that's where the idea was to promote, more importantly, the value of design and demonstrate how design can work in this sector. And that's where I got involved with toys and games. So that's what was the beginning and more or less the foundation. Of course, subsequently, a lot of my graduates at NIPT decided not only they did the final project with the toy industry, they also worked with many toy industries in India, and some of them set up their own companies, designing and manufacturing their own toys.
It's amazing. Well, let's talk about board games a little. Do you prefer board games over video games? Someone who comes from that age where the board games were more obviously undeniably fun, they were super fun, and they still are if you play a lot, but this coming of age of these video games have slightly overtaken the board game industry. What are your thoughts about
Well, that's true. I think that's not only true only in terms of board games, but virtually large part of our social engagement is now determined through a screen. So in a way, what we call social is getting to be more and more antisocial or less social. So I think board games certainly have not only a role, but also a potential to grow and to some extent balance out the obsession, which is screen obsession amongst all ages. It's not limited to children per se. Everybody is predominantly, engaged with the world through screen, which was not the case.
Right.
And board games certainly help you to, keep your time away from screen. It also allows you to connect with other people more emotionally, more intimately, and the physical presence of people around you completely changes and transforms the experience of being together. That's one. Other is, I think we need to realize that board games play a very interesting role of what you would call simplifying our day-to-day experiences, whether they are today, whether they are in history, whether they are in future. Ultimately, what we are doing in board game is how do you bring in those experiences through a journey that we can take through the board games. So there can also be games based on history, which can be very valuable to children and their learning.
Right.
There also can be games about sustainability, an area which is an area of concern which is so significant today. And is it possible, let's say, through playing of board games, can we highlight the kind of challenges that we are going to face and how do we overcome those challenges? Same thing with energy, same thing with water. So there are many areas which board games can address. So in a way, I see a huge amount of potential with board games, not only in terms of the kind of themes and concerns that it can bring about, but it can also actually create, a social, as a value.
So this social, this physical nature of board games does, allow person to, develop communication skill, and also we would say like social skills and communication skills. Board game does allow that. Since we are on this topic of board games, can you also tell us how can we make games more intuitive, more engaging, more fun? Like while designing it, as a designer, how do I ensure it that I keep it fun and engaging? Because while designing it, we do tend to get a lot into the technicality aspect of it, rather than that I am making it for people and I want to make it fun.
See, eventually when somebody plays a game, whether it's a board game or a video game,
Right.
you as a player want to get into that character, you want to get into that whole environment, you want to get into that whole experience. And that to me is the predominant part of designing a game. So it has to start with how engaging the game can be. Other thing is of course how easy or difficult it is for somebody to learn a game. Third, what the fidelity in terms of, is it something which sustains certain intensity, engagement of all the players who are there. And fourth, what is the kind of, what kind of values does it, put across while playing the game. So games also in terms of experience certainly can inculcate a set of values. More importantly, I think what is happening in the families in terms of age groups, this whole distancing amongst people of different age groups, especially in a family. So children, parents, board games can get them together.
Okay. As a designer, how does one go about, user research and play testing of the game, and how do I incorporate those changes while I develop the game further?
Okay, so board games seem to be pretty easy to design, but an average time for developing a board game can be anywhere between 1 year to 3 years. It depends on where you start and what is your focus. So first thing is, who are you designing for? That would predominantly be age groups,
Right.
the kind of environment within which these board games will be played. You can be designing board games as teaching aids. Then they need to connect to what children need to learn. So if they are teaching aids, are they going to be playing in schools or are they going to play at home? If they are games which actually are about learning apart from the curricular or motor skill development or memory, etc., then you are looking at what kind of themes are you looking. So you need to research the theme, you need to research the age groups, you need to research the kind of situations that prevail and the kind of longevity of the gameplay. Because whatever you say, large part of people who play game may not like to play a game for 4 hours, 5 hours, but there are huge groups of what is called board game players across the world, and those people are so passionate and driven by engaging with the board games that they don't even mind playing a game which goes on for 1 week or 10 days. But that is how it is. But that's a different kind of clientele that you have. Predominantly, you're designing for people who can find, board game as a way of coming together. So whether it's a family, it would be a different kind of a board game. If it's a social gathering, the attention span and the kind of engagement that is required would be much lesser compared to, let's say, a small group or family. And therefore, those games which are designed for, let's say, social occasions would be different. So all this does require understanding and, some amount of research and focus. And once you've done that, then of course, it all depends on what is the theme that you pick up. Again, based on what you're targeting. And how do you develop the theme? How do you look at what exactly is the plot in the game? And what are the characters that you are looking at? Is it a cooperative game? Because you can also have games which are not necessarily competitive. You can also have games which are cooperative, where all the players come together to play against the game. So that's also an interesting concept which has been there for a while. There are less cooperative games comparatively, because a large number of games are competitive. But the whole trend of developing cooperative games is also gaining ground. So these are the other ways of, basically imagining how a game can be developed. And then, of course, subsequently you have to look at how does it appeal in terms of visuals. How is it true to the theme, within which it is located? Does it evoke that sense of being in that environment, in that period? If it is space, does the game, graphics, the elements, the characters, do they give me that sense or the experience of space travel? Or similarly, I go back to, let's say, medieval period. So does it take me back to time, of those, realities, whether it is culture, whether it is dress, whether it is environment. So all these little details matter. And closer you are in terms of, your theme and how it is interpreted in terms of visuals, characters, etc., more engaging the game would be.
Do you envision board games and these video games complementing each other, in future? And if you do, where does it evolve? How does it evolve? Where does it go? Can you throw a little light on that?
Of course, all board games actually can become video games. So there is nothing which stops a board game to, get into a digital space.
Right.
So it's not that if it's a board game, it cannot be played through a digital medium. Very often it works the other way as well, that many of the video games are converted into board games. Right. And I would believe that if you actually have researched the theme and worked out all the details as one would need in terms of conceptualization, whether you apply it to the board game or whether you apply it to a video game, it would be the same thing. The challenge is video game is more dynamic. It has ability to recreate, three-dimensionality and certain experientiality in terms of time. In board game, you have to imagine a lot of things, so you have to get into a character, whereas video game, everything comes alive. So there is a connection and they can very well be together. And one getting into the other is something which has been happening and one can always see a connection there.
And what would you say the current trend, growing trend of the gaming industry in India is like?
It is actually gaining ground. It is growing quite a bit. We don't have too many companies or firms which are doing original games. Large part of the gaming industry in India predominantly is doing part of the components, elements that go into a video game. But I do see quite a few entrepreneurial initiatives where people are trying to develop original games which are based in Indian themes and Indian characters. So it's beginning to kind of gain ground. As an opportunity, it's huge because gaming industry would need certain talent certain professionals, a certain set of competencies which helps them to grow. And depending on either whether you are specializing in one or the other part of the gaming industry, or you want to become a complete, game developer, it is a huge value to the industry. And I would imagine that if you're looking at opportunity, the remuneration can be anywhere between, 5.5, 6 lakhs to about 10, 15, 20 lakhs, depending on your, beginning of the professional journey to maybe few years into the industry. And more you can handle, more value you will provide to the industry. But of course, there are different aspects. You can be just become a game art specialist. You can also become a character developer, or you can become somebody who develops the entire game.
What would you say your favorite games would be? Best designed games, according to you?
I have not really gone too much into video games. With my age, I was never drawn to that. One is, of course, large part of video games that exist depend on speed and skill, dexterity. And as you grow in age, you lose some of that speed. Also, I think I do not necessarily connect to the kind of themes that are there, which are more to do with fights and aggression and killing and
Fair enough.
so that is something which doesn't work with me so much. But I don't mind playing games which are simple. My problem is I don't enjoy connecting with the screen so much. So screen beyond a point I'm not able to take. So I would rather go back to games which are non-digital.
Okay, few of them, like any non-digital game that you like?
See, games that I have played typically are snake and ladders that everybody knows. Monopoly.
Right.
These are some of the games which are classic games, right? And there are some new games which are also interesting. They're simple. Because one thing is you do not want to, unlike an avid board game player who wants to understand the game for next 3 hours and then play it and master it. I would rather have something which tells me how it's to be played and go ahead and play it and enjoy the experience. Yeah.
Do you think one has to wait to complete their graduation to get into this industry, or they can start before and sell their games in the market?
It is possible to see. Ultimately, program like the programs offered at JS Institute, are hands-on, and at different stages of your studies, the work is outcome-based. So if you are, for example, trying to understand mechanics of games, then at the end of it, you're supposed to design a board game. And I do not know if you are aware that we did have recently some industry people coming in and say, okay, we can buy this game and produce it.
Right.
And these games were designed by people, students who were in the foundation year.
Right.
So right from that possible time, in the first year itself, if you actually put yourself into it, use this time meaningfully, put in hard work, and of course, put in your best creative hat, the outcome, if it's a value to the industry is always looking for good ideas. So at any given time, I think one could always, have this connection between the industry and find, what is called converting potential or commercial potential of an idea into something which is reality. Also, there could be other possibilities that one can collaborate with industry. Industry can give a specific brief. Over a time, students can take up that brief and convert that brief into something which is marketable, which is profitable, and which is meaningful from the business perspective for the industry. So that is possible.
What would you say, like the opportunities that awaits for game or game design in general, like for students who are pursuing it or plan to pursue it? Like, do you think there are opportunities for them? And if yes, then what kind?
Opportunities are different. So, again, I say that is while the focus of the programs here is digital, the foundations in design are common, whether you're working in digital space or you're working in physical space. So, either way, the kind of skill sets, the ability to work on specific brief, following a specific process, these are some of the things which can be applied regardless of where you want to work. So all this combined actually give you a huge amount of opportunity. If you are focused on game design and gaming industry, there are a lot of opportunities there as well. But you don't necessarily have to only do game design. There are also other digital products which are there. You can also do UI UX, which is equally challenging and exciting, and huge amount of opportunities that exist in UI UX, app design, website design, visual communication, social media. All these are opportunities where all the skills which you have can be applied meaningfully, and you actually can have a gainful employment.
With the growing field of designing in general, what do you think the payback is like? Is it like, I'm sure it's not engineering or doctor kind of field, where money is just instant, or...
I don't think that is true. I mean, engineers actually are struggling. Let me tell you that.
Now, yes.
Yeah. So if you say that engineering is good, but compare any practice of medicine.
Okay. I'll have to.
We'll do this again.
Sorry?
We'll do this part again.
Which one? The last question?
Yeah, last question.
Okay. You have to again ask the same
Otherwise,
question.
we are already through 20 minutes of
I think this last question would just payback.
payback, how to get projects, interesting projects which are coming in the market.
Yeah.
I mean, how to get into companies like Ubisoft? Is there a way? Do they hold, some projects or something like
Okay.
that?
Oh. It's yellow.
You want some water or something?
Yeah, it's okay. It's the last question. I'll read for it.
Sir, any question you think that we have missed out that
Anything
you
that
would like
you
to-
would like to talk about?
so that she can frame something?
Yeah. Let's finish this then.
Which one?
Let's finish
This one
redo the
and
last
then we
question.
can.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what would you say the payback is like in design industry? Like, how can students get into these, this big network of gaming industry or just design industry in general, and work with these big companies or under them as an intern even? So, how does it go about? Like, is it easy or is it difficult? And how is the payback like?
You missed the question.
I
You have to,
sorry.
you have to
I just-
talk about doctors and engineers. It's very important.
Do I?
It's
was
very
that good?
important. It's very important because you want them to
Let's
move.
not get into that.
Huh? So you want them to move away from that stereotypical
Actually,
career.
I
Na?
wanted
You
to
want them to say, look at some other careers.
Okay.
No,
Huh?
I mean, like, I think we should not get into doctors and engineers.
we don't want to. He's like
Acha, you don't want to. I thought.
target them.
Okay. No, I want to say that if you want to
Actually, I
become an
just-
engineer, firstly, you'll not get a job. There's no guarantee. And for doctor, you need to be ready to study 12 years before
Yeah.
you can get anything worthwhile.
In fact, this is something, this thing.
Actually, I
This
think
is what
we
I'm
should
saying.
know them.
frame it in a different way.
So I said,
Okay,
what is the payback? Let's say people would like to pursue
Compared to
engineering and
these
doctorate.
typical fields like, okay, how is the payback like compared
Yeah,
to these
yeah.
fields like engineering and doctor?
Yeah, because what I'm going to do is one is talk about engineers and doctors in terms of challenges of employment and investment. And secondly, I'm also talking about the fact that Not everybody is geared to become a doctor or engineer. Some people have a creative flair. That's where one has to take.
Okay,
Yeah.
then would make sense. Okay. So what would you say in a compare? Sorry. Okay, so what would you say compared to these typical fields like engineering and doctorate, compared to design industry in general, the payback is different, and what is the difficulty and challenges one would face going into that field?
One thing is you're assuming that engineers are doing well. Well, engineers are not certainly doing well. If you read the press nowadays and you see the news, you see the data, they're saying that 35% of the graduates in engineering don't get a job.
Very true.
And if you want to become a doctor, firstly you need an aptitude.
Right.
Second, you need to be ready to study 12 hard years, to become a doctor of any value in terms of payback if you're talking about.
Right.
Other interesting issue is that what is it that you're oriented to? Somebody who is oriented to engineering and doctorate has some kind of mindset. If you have a creative mindset, if you think that you want to actually enjoy and experience something that you contribute in terms of your imagination, your ideas, in a very prolific way, then of course you go into an industry which is predominantly a creative industry. I'm not saying engineers cannot be creative, but if you look at creative industry, it is about design. It is about any areas which allow you to give wings to your imagination, your ideas, and celebrate innovation and creativity. So that's what you are looking at. And in terms of payback, see, it's important to know that everybody says, how much of money will I get? The question is to be turned around. How much of enjoyment I want out of my work? And will I enjoy doing if I believe that that is what I wanted to do? So I would suggest, and that is true with any profession, more importantly for people who are into creative pursuit, that you need to enjoy what you do. And if you enjoyed what you do, and if you do have high benchmarks of what you want to achieve in terms of quality outcome, there is no way that the world will not take notice of you, and there is no way they'll not pay you. Everybody looks for good ideas, they look for innovative ideas, they look at new imagination, and that is something which designers and design provides. So, of course, you have to remember that it's hard work. Anything which is good as an outcome, it requires a lot of sweat and blood to go in. And more importantly, any creative field, because they are dependent on you. People who look for ideas are not the ones who can imagine ideas. Therefore, they go to people with imagination. So, the responsibility is entirely on you to make sure that you give them something which is beyond their imagination and it works for their purpose, their interest, and possibly the way they are going to use it and apply it in whatever way they want to. So these are something that are challenges. They are also exciting. They are also engaging. And bottom line is enjoy your work. One more thing I would like to say, that enjoying work does not happen after you graduate. You have to enjoy the learning, because the initial years, especially after school or immediately after graduation, you get into a creative field. The amount of intensity of engagement, the openness to learn and hone your skills, knowledge, and competencies is something which gets determined by the end of your studies. Once you're out in the field, there would be opportunities to learn, but will be few and far between. So if you join design, you must enjoy the learning, you must enjoy the challenges, and you must maximize your time. In any design education that you want to pursue?
It was amazing chatting with you today. It was very informative, and I'm glad I spent my afternoon talking to you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.